All right. Bill, are you ready?
I'm ready. I'm here also.
Okay. We'll call this meeting to order. Could we get a roll call attendance, please?
Yes, excuse me. Commissioner Foister. Blisk,
Here.
Nelson,
Here.
Petroselli,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Meyer,
Here.
Mayor Clark,
Here.
and Chairperson Montague.
Here.
Is here.
Everybody's here. Let's see, first item, public hearing is a continuance request, application, sketch plan, location, McChesney Minor Subdivision Lot 2, Zone Residential, R and Future Development FD, applicant Chris Hawkins, Alpine Planning LLC, owner for Winds Ranch LLLP, and State of Bernadine C. Endicott. TJ, did you want to add anything?
Sure. Yeah, I'll just real quick give a little bit of extra context that again, we've been working diligently with the applicant team and the development team on this application from the last hearing that we had. And as you all know, Preston reached out to schedule a special meeting on April 4th. Next week. So we are on schedule to be there for that. I just needed a little bit of extra time to be able to get a comprehensive review and comments back and things. So projects progressing, just needed a little bit of extra time. So that's why talking with the applicant, they made that request and staff agreed with that. So just a little bit of background on that for the meeting next week.
Thanks.
Yep.
Do we need to vote on a continuance? Could we get a roll? I guess I need a motion.
Yeah,
I'll move to we continue. Okay, we're all moving at once.
Wait a second. Open it for public comment.
public comment.
Oh, that's right.
Is there any public comment on the Four Winds subdivision continuance? I'm closing public comment. Now I'm ready for a motion.
I move to approve the continuance request for Winds sketch plan to April 4th, 2023.
Second.
Bill was first.
Okay.
We get a roll call on that, please.
Roll call vote, okay. Commissioner Lisk,
Yay.
Nelson.
Yes.
I,
Petroselli,
Aye.
Meyer,
Aye.
Clark,
Aye.
and Montague.
Aye.
Okay. Unanimous.
Passes unanimously. Next is the work session. Overview presentation of the proposed development review process, and I will hand it over to TJ and Katie.
Excellent, thanks. Preston, would you mind allowing me to share my screen, please? So this is somewhat going a little bit backwards, but in what we've been presenting and everything, we felt that it was really important to kind of take this little bit of a step back. There, let me get all my stuff in order. There we go. You guys seeing that presentation now? To just make sure that we're all on the same page and understanding the what we're changing, if you will, through the code updates. Sorry, I'm trying to get my screens to the point where I'm not looking way over, but it's not working very well. So we'll just go with it. And so I wanted to just take a couple of minutes and go through kind of the bigger picture of how it's all set up and why we've set it up this way. Specifically related to the, gosh, this is gonna bug me. There we go. That'll work. Specifically related to the subdivision regulations or process and the PUD and site plan stuff and how it all relates together. So hopefully I'll go through relatively quick. If you have questions, by all means, stop me along the way, and hopefully we'll have a little bit of time at the end. Why is it? There we go. Okay, so again, we'll kind of go through the land development process. Specifically, we'll talk about the application review process and application types, and then we'll describe why each element is important in succession, if you will. So first, just real quick, and I think this is somewhat of a review, but we're setting up the process to flow like this. So each application type, when an applicant wants to make a request for any type of application, will follow this general review process. So it'll start with a pre-application. They'll submit an application. It will have a completeness review, and then we'll go to referral agencies. Referral agencies will have a period of time to review and provide comments, and then that feedback loop then goes back to a resubmittal process to make sure that all applications are meeting the minimum standards prior to scheduling hearings or meetings with the Planning Commission and or Town Council. So this is, again, a little bit different, and the point that we're trying to make here is that there's that feedback loop. We're trying to make sure that applications are really primed for hearings, so that you all know that they're at least checking the boxes and meeting the standards before they come in front of you all and the Town Council, to make sure, at least to prevent the best we can continuances for extended periods of time. Why is it? This is. There we go. Okay. Now land use applications. So now we're going to go through each of the application types in general, big classifications. And I'm going to show it in a linear fashion. But just know that these, and as you're all probably well aware, land use applications don't necessarily come in a linear fashion. But for sake of argument and discussion, we'll show them in a linear fashion. And I think the point that I really want to hit home this evening are these two processes: the platting, which also includes that's subdivisions and the construction documents, CDs, and the rezoning process. That essentially they're bookends on both ends of that you're kind of in this feedback loop in those two before you can move forward to site design and or building permit. And so I'll talk a little bit more about what I mean by that through the next slides. So first, these are how the next slides are going to be set up. They're more set up so that if you can reference them in the future. But on the left side here are the objectives of the process. On the right side are the documents that we review. I'm not going to go through all of these line by line, but I just want to at least touch on the concepts for each, right? Annexation is a change from county jurisdiction to the town jurisdiction. It includes initial zoning, and there's some impact assessments, impact analysis that's required as well, in addition to annexation agreement. There's a lot more, obviously. You've seen a lot of that in the Chapter 7 updates, but you know, for the sake of tonight, I don't want to necessarily dwell on this one, other than knowing that that's kind of the first step, if you will, in the land development process to annex into the town, so that you all have authority to over what happens on that property. Next is the subdivision process. And so we annex plan and then we divide it up into parcels to be able to sell. This creates buildable lots, creates saleable lots. In Colorado, you're not allowed, or legally, you're not able to sell lots or parcels under 35 acres without it being platted. And that means it needs to go through the town subdivision process, or the county if it's in the county. And so that's kind of the whole point of the subdivision process. This also establishes rights of way, easements, and make sure that we have adequate water supply. Of course, that's a gross overstatement or oversimplification of the process. But in general, that's the objectives of what we're trying to do through the subdivision process. In the documents that we review are the plat. You've seen a lot of those studies and reports that includes traffic, drainage, geotech report, other hazard reports, things of those natures. And in Ridgway, we include public improvements. So the construction documents is included in this process as well. So this is a breakdown of the subdivision process in Ridgway. First, you start with the concept plan, which is the sketch plan. We look at conformance with the master plan. We look at the conceptual layout, access points, feasibility of the project, some of the major components at a conceptual level, utility services, so on and so forth. Then we get into the preliminary plat, and this is where we have most of the engineering documents. The construction documents are submitted at this time as well. Neither the sketch plan nor the preliminary plat are recorded with the county. And that's important to know because those don't create legal lots yet. Those are the process to get there. Then in Ridgway, after the preliminary plat is approved by both Planning Commission and the Town Council, we move to construction documents, and that includes a pre-con meeting with the town engineer, town manager, public works departments, and the completion of public improvements. As you're all aware, there are some items that must be completed during the construction process, or there are others that may be deferred through the subdivision improvement agreement at time of final plat. And so there's a lot of discussion between staff and the applicant at this moment, trying to figure out exactly where what needs to be completed in order to submit a final plat, because the final plat is what creates the actual lots. So then the final plat comes in, we review that. It needs to just be, essentially it's a mirror image of the preliminary plat with some as-builts. That means that they've completed the installation of the improvements and are submitting it for recording. Once it gets recorded, that's when the lots can go on the market and be sold.
PJ, on that last slide there, what
Sure.
does SIA stand for?
Subdivision improvement agreement.
Okay. So I would thought the subdivision improvement agreement would come in the construction process or earlier on. It's with the final plat.
So the SIA comes in at the final plat, because the default is that all of the improvements are done prior to submittal of the final plat. Does that make sense? So the agreement, if you will, to complete the improvements is the preliminary plat and the construction documents that basically says the developer has to do those before they can submit the final plat. So the SIA bonds anything that's not completed yet to be done at a later date. A perfect example of that is like landscaping, where if you get completed towards the end of summer or fall, you're not going to install the landscaping until spring.
I'm familiar with SIA. I just thought it came along earlier in the process, but I guess it really doesn't matter as long as everything's done before the final plat.
Correct. Yep.
And TJ, this is Bill, and I may have missed this since I missed the special meeting, as well as the last meeting. The work meeting. On both 5 and 6, under the preliminary plat, you have construction documents. And then 6, you have the entire heading of construction documents. Could you just quickly go over how that works?
Yeah, well, the real short answer is I changed it in this presentation because I just noticed that just before, and I changed it to construction, not construction documents.
Okay,
So essentially what happens is during the preliminary plat, the construction documents are reviewed and approved. And then they move into construction in compliance with the construction documents as approved.
It's only specific to the infrastructure and the required public.
okay.
Correct. Public improvements.
Right.
Sorry for that confusion.
Yeah, that might be a better way for me to understand it, rather than having the word construction in both of
Yeah,
those.
right. No, good thought.
Cool. Thanks.
Good thought.
Yep. All right. So once it gets recorded, you know, these can again run concurrently. Platting, subdivision, and rezoning kind of work together depending on what you're trying to accomplish or the applicants are trying to accomplish. But in general, you have a piece of property and then you zone it. And so that's why I put it this way. What we're looking for in the zoning process is, and it's called rezoning simply because the initial zoning is at annexation. So the idea is that every property has an initial zoning at time of annexation, and rezoning or change of that zoning is a rezoning. The objective of the property is to look at the land use classifications, those in the master plan, make sure that it's consistent with the uses and contemplated in the master plan. And also that there's compatibility between the utilities and the infrastructure and the land uses. So make sure that there's adequate size or capacity to handle the increased use potentially. Again, those are things that should be evaluated at the time of site plan, and if they're looked at, I'm sorry, not site plan, subdivision, and if they are evaluated together. So if there's a zoning running concurrently with a subdivision process, then we can look at all of it together. But this is one of the things that we're looking for at the rezoning as well. Documents that are reviewed are the dimensional standards, making sure that lot size setbacks are able to be met. Traffic and drainage impacts are being evaluated, right? Different use will have different impact on traffic generation. Lot coverage will have impacts on drainage. Making sure that it's consistent with the future land use map in the comprehensive plan or the master plan. And it's consistent with the neighborhood and whatnot. So those are the components that we're looking at through the rezoning process. And here's the big one that I'm gonna slow down a little bit. No, not really, but this is a shift and a change. So previously, or I guess currently, the PUD process combines the subdivision process and the rezoning process into one, I'll call it more complex process, the PUD. What we're proposing in this change, these updates, is to pull the PUD process and focus it on a rezoning. So it's an overlay. So there's an underlying zone district, and then you put the PUD on top of it. And that allows applicants to request changes to the underlying zone district standards to meet a specific need or demand or some type of a feature that they're trying to accomplish on that piece of land or that development. The big part is it's all negotiated, as you all know. In the PUD process updates under Chapter 7 that you've seen, we are suggesting a higher level of scrutiny and a higher level of public benefit for the in return, if you will, for more flexibility. So in order for applicants to do something different, the town has higher level of scrutiny or requirement for it. That's kind of the concept there. Similarly to rezoning, we're looking at all of the same things. And this PUD guide and development plan is essentially the guide is the zone district standards. So much like you would look at the MR zone and the schedule of uses, the setbacks, the dimensional standards, all those should all be in a PUD guide as well for this specific zone district. The development plan is the zoning map for that. And the reason I'm not sure there's going to be too much in Ridgway on that, but essentially you can have different, what's called generally referred to as like planning areas, where different areas of the development could have different zoning standards. So it's basically the development plan is creating its own zoning map for the project area, and the PUD guide creates the zoning standards for that development area, the project.
Can you give us an example of that, TJ?
Do you an example of like how that could be different planning areas?
Yeah, how it would change, how the PUD would request a separate zone for a separate area of the overall PUD, right? Did I get that right?
Yep.
Okay.
You know what I think I might do is just show one that I'm actually working on right now. This is a
So TJ, you're proposing, this is Jack.
Yep.
You're proposing that this PUD overlay district would go over any zoning district. From residential to commercial to GC to industrial, so it would be applicable to any underlying zone. Is that what you're proposing?
That is correct. Yep.
I think it's an interesting approach.
It's, well, in my opinion, it's a more standard or traditional way of handling PUDs. That's how I've seen it in other communities, but every community is different. So
Can you guys see what I'm sharing right now?
Yep.
Okay. So this is a pretty simple one. So you can see the subdivision is kind of this horseshoe thing, and you have PA1, PA2, PA3, PA4, and PA5. So those are planning areas. Okay, so this is essentially a very basic development plan. Okay. Now this document here is the development guide, the PUD guide for that plan. And so you can see it lays out, and it's again, not necessarily apples to apples, right? But you could see there's this right here. If this PUD guide does not address the type of regulation standards of the Kremlin code, the provisions of the code will apply. So basically that's the relationship between the code and the PUD guide. This one has different definitions, and then we get into the different planning areas. So you can have different standards for them, and then, you know, these are basically your standards. So in planning area 1, these are the uses that are allowed. These are the accessory uses, square footage, setbacks, all that kind of stuff, lot coverage, height. So this is a pretty simple example of how you could set that up. And now this is the, when somebody wants to come in and develop one of these properties in here, one of these lots, we'll refer to this document first and foremost when we're looking at how to review like a building permit in here. Russ, does that help kind of give an example?
Yeah, that does help. And just one other bit of clarification I'm looking for on that.
Mhm.
Your previous slide was showing things kind of in a line, and it's like this rezoning PUD comes after the plating, but really they would be happening at about the same time, wouldn't they?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, because it doesn't make sense to have this come after the plat to me. So I was just trying to make sure that
Correct.
they're both kind of at the same time. Okay, fair enough. Good.
Yeah. Now, the only thing, the caveat that I'll say to that is we can use Riverfront Village as an example. That was platted. We didn't go through a plat process. It's still one piece of one lot. And so they would just come through the rezoning process for a PUD in this new process.
Okay.
So they would rezone to a PUD
Correct.
from the existing zone.
Yep. So basically rezone from general commercial to general commercial with a PUD.
And what would be the benefit of that? Why would anybody want to do that?
If what they're proposing doesn't meet current standards and there's site constraints and things they want to achieve and see done that the current regs wouldn't allow for, a PUD negotiated by way of what TJ's talking about can provide for that flexibility. TJ, is that fair?
Yep.
But to get that, they're going to be required, be held to a higher standard from the town. And the higher standard they're going to be held to in the town is totally negotiated and not in writing.
Can I add to that?
Yep.
Yeah, this is John. The way I see this, Jack, is that what we're really trying to do here is kind of de-incentivize PUDs in general.
Yeah,
Try and get developers
I understand that. Working on that. That's a great idea, but I'm just trying to understand.
Yeah, by making the PUD process kind of more onerous, we're making people, hopefully incentivizing them to go through and use the existing land use code allowances to their benefit and not actually go through a PUD unless it's sort of no other way to do it.
Yeah, or in short, they have to make it worth the town's time to
and their time and money, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, let me make sure I don't miscommunicate. I'm very much in favor of this. I'm not a fan of a PUD and never have been a fan of a PUD and involved in several of them currently. But what this really does by default is make the zoning that the town has in place achieve more of what the town wants by discouraging a PUD. So in the past, we've had pieces of land where people go and put a PUD and they put their idea in. I'm a big proponent of having the project built with the zoning that the town has already approved.
If I can just offer, the biggest takeaway for me on this is that the PUD in this new proposed way is being separated from the subdivision procedure altogether. Right now, they're essentially all combined into one.
Yeah.
Now they're being separated. So that's the way I like to look at it.
And we're going to kind of consider it a zone.
Right.
And in the past, PUDs were considered subdivisions.
Subdivisions, yeah, zoning overlay.
And the PUD guide and development plan, is that individual to each PUD, is that correct? And so who writes that and who's responsible for that?
The applicant.
The applicant.
Yep. And so this is actually the documents that Wetterhorn, also known as Yellow Brick Lane, went through as well. So the applicant will submit those and then it'll be reviewed through the review process. And then the other component that we've kind of learned through this process is that rezonings generally get recorded, ordinances or in Ridgway. And so this will require that these PUD guides get recorded at the clerk and recorder's office. So that that was a great comment brought up by Joanne, that if it's not on the title or the deed research or title commitment, homeowners won't really know. And so these will be documents that get recorded at the clerk and recorder's office. And that's a minor but important change as well.
So it'd be kind of a covenant on the land then.
Correct. Yep, it's new zoning district.
But usually zoning doesn't get recorded. That's an interesting approach, but I kind of agree with Joanne.
Yeah.
Well,
I would actually say that the standard that we've seen is that ordinances would get recorded at the county. And zoning is an ordinance. Resolutions don't necessarily need to, so plats are resolutions. Plats, in order to get the assessment correct, need to be recorded. So it gets into some wishy-washy area, and I know I'm kind of tainting the water right there, but yeah, at the end of the day, the idea is that this would get recorded so that it's tied to the property in the deed history through transfer of title.
I think that's a great idea.
All right, now, does that so far make some sense? Everyone kind of comfortable with that for the moment? Because I'm going to go ahead and shake the world up a little bit more with my next one. All right. So this is a new process for the town, the site design planning, essentially. It's called the site plan process. And this is when, because I think, Russ, what you were kind of alluding to, I think in your response when I said Riverfront Village would be a good example. They would go through a PUD zoning process, then they'd do a site plan. And the site plan is where we would get all of the construction documents, all of the site layout, make sure that the landscaping, the parking, the setbacks, all the signage plans, the drainage is done, all the access is there, both internally and externally. So now it's on a site process, site design process, rather than a platting subdivision process. And so this is where we get to dive much deeper into the site design and look at your water alignments. If you don't go through a full subdivision process that requires public improvements, right? That's like that's why I think Riverfront Village is a good example there, where they would basically set their design standards through the rezoning to a PUD process, and they would submit a site plan rather than a plat. So we still get all of the things that we would get through with a subdivision, but we kind of focus on the impacts. The impacts of the platting and the subdivision process, as I mentioned, are saleable lots. The focus of this process is to look at the site design, access, and layout, and the building orientation. So does that make some sense?
Jack?
Originally, we had talked about the site plan being approved at the planning commission level. Is that still the case?
I don't remember where that landed. Katie, do you know where we are at with that one?
We talked about it going to planning commission, but the overall consensus most recently was to still have it go to the town council. Staff would still be okay with it going to planning commission, but we didn't think we had full support of that. So we had it going to town council for right now in the documents.
Can we talk about this more? Seems like the planning commission meeting I attended, I thought it was going to planning commission, then it left the planning commission and went to staff and came back as it was going to council. So I'd like to hear what happened when it was not in front of the planning commission.
Or the question was, did we have a consensus for that to go to council, or do we need one? I mean, where does the direction come from that?
Where does the direction come from? What?
To decide that it has to go to council, is that just for John to decide it needs to go to council, or does the planning commission have some say in that?
I think the planning commission can definitely have an opinion and a recommendation on what we do, and then we can have that be a further discussion when we bring it forward too. I don't know, TJ, do you want to finish your process presentation and then hop into maybe a little bit more details like that at the end, or I'll let you and the commission decide?
Yeah, thanks, Katie. And you know, just a couple of thoughts on that while they're fresh in my brain is one, that process is in a table and it's very easy to amend. We've kind of gone back and forth because a site plan process is new and it's a kind of a combination of a lot of things. And in general, right now, if you will, it's within the PUD process. So we felt that it should probably mimic that process. In theory, though, the code is, the standards are there, the code process is clear enough where if it checks all the boxes and meets the standards, it should essentially be approved, right? And so that's why, like Katie mentioned, we try to ratchet things back to the appropriate approval body based on whether or not it's meeting the standards, the clarity of it meeting a standard. So the idea would be that at some point, we'd all be comfortable that a site plan meets the standards and it can either go to planning commission or as an administrative approval. But we understand that through this process, that this is brand new, so we don't want to change that chain of approval too much, is kind of the approach for right now.
What would the benefit be of it going to council?
A more collaborative process, just like TJ was saying, just as it is now. And I think Katie was alluding to it. Initially, staff felt that planning commission level would suffice, given that we have a PUD overlay, and you're going through the site planning process, provided that what they're presenting meets everything in the PUD guide. And then what is governed by the PUD guide and governed by town standards, provided the what's being proposed meets that. I mean, it's pretty straightforward, you know. Planning commission in our eye, or at least relatively early on, we thought planning commission could be afforded that authority to approve. But again, I don't remember when the last conversation was. There was some hesitancy around that and a desire to see that go to the town council, which I totally understand. I think TJ and Katie totally understand as well. Just maintaining that collaborative linear approach from planning commission and town council.
As a way to prevent things falling through the cracks, sort of for a new system.
Absolutely, that's a good, yeah.
Yeah, it makes sense.
It's an element to it.
Yeah.
Just make it even more comprehensive. At the same, on the other end, play devil's advocate, it's another month or two of waiting for another meeting, right? And so,
I mean, I
there's a
would,
drawback there.
I would like to entertain the idea that it stays, it's approved at planning commission, where the planning commission is for some reason uncomfortable with it. Or stressed by it because of the applicant, or all the politics and body language that goes into this stuff. Sometimes we could choose to refer it.
Yeah. Or staff could recommend it.
Yeah,
To keep you in that sort of.
if we felt like we needed their help,
Yeah.
you know, or if they felt like they wanted to be involved, they could call us and say, hey, we'd like to see this, and we could have a collaborative.
Is there a planning commission phone?
Well, I think it's on your desk.
Yeah. Well, I agree with where you guys are going with this. My one question is, if council has the ultimate approval on this, are we giving an okay to something that we don't really have the authority to give an okay on, right? We tell someone, oh yeah, this is looking good. Yeah, we're happy with this. We recommend it for approval, and then it goes to council and they're like, oh yeah, we don't like this at all. You
That's
know,
happened.
that's where I see a hang up with this. Otherwise, I think it's
Potential.
fine.
Potential.
Yeah, but if we're giving the nod on something and then, but that, there may be other cases where that happens, where we're like, yeah, this is all good, we're moving forward. And then it goes to council and then suddenly it's not good. And then it's like, what was the point of getting a site plan approval from the planning commission if it doesn't mean anything? It's kind of a question.
I mean, I guess I would say that that's exactly how it is right now on every application. So every, with the exception of a sketch plan and the variance, because you're sitting a little bit differently as a variance, every other action by the planning commission is a recommendation to the town council. So this is in line with everything else currently.
So then I'd come back to, then why does this need to go all the way to council at this stage when everything else gets approved on this level and goes to council for the final anyway?
So are you saying, I'm sorry, I'm a little confused. Are you saying, suggesting maybe that it just go to town council and not planning commission?
No, I'm suggesting that if it's the way it is with everything, then it just stops at, it just goes to planning commission. Why does it have to go all the way to council when they have the final say in the end anyway?
Well, if it doesn't go to them, they won't have the final say.
I'll say. But you're advocating for it to
Yeah,
opt at the planning commission.
I'm kind of going back and forth. All right, yeah, they don't have the final say on the site plan, but they have the final say on the project, don't they? Oh,
not necessarily. Because in theory, this, and if I might continue going through this process, because you see that the next one is building permits. And so what we've been talking about is a site plan tied to a PUD. What we haven't talked about is a site plan tied to a building permit. And so the site plan kind of straddles both of those areas. So for example, the firehouse project that just got approved last year, that didn't require a rezone, didn't require rezoning, didn't require plat. Well, actually it did require platting. It required a lot consolidation, but really it went right to building permit. And through the building permit process, we were trying to look through and get site approvals as well. So parking requirements, setback requirements. They ended up getting some variances previously. And it would have been through the site plan process that we would have caught the fact that this straddled two properties prior to the building permit being submitted and applied for. And so this site plan kind of straddles both of those realms. And so a site plan, or sorry, a building permit right now, and therefore the site plan on a single building would not be coming to the planning commission and would be approved by the administratively. So what are we looking for in a building permit? Now, by separating out the site plan component of a building permit, now the building permit is only looking at the construction and occupancy components of it. There's a zoning review of that makes sure that the use is consistent with the site plan, that it's consistent with the zone document, zone district, things like that. But really the focus is on the IBC or International Building Codes, the fire code, the building code, making sure that it meets some of those just dimensional standards. And again, putting the review where it makes the most sense, because at that time, the applicants are spending all their money or spending money on the actual construction and of the building and those building plans, as opposed to a site plan being a little bit more conceptual and higher level to look at the site layout and design. So it's a way to bridge that gap between essentially a PUD that would require site design standards as well as a building permit. that is an administrative process. So I'm not sure if that helped explain that a little bit, but because it does, the site plan is one of those that sits right in the realm. Sometimes they're reviewed administratively currently, if it's just a building permit. Other times it goes all the way to town council with a PUD. So that was all that I had on this, and I'm happy to go back to slides and talk through this some more.
Nobody has anything now. Do we want to revisit that conversation we were having? Where did we land on that? I mean, I can't remember. I thought it was John that said he'd like to see it go to council. John, do you remember?
You're on mute.
Not anymore. No, I think we need to retain flexibility. That's the most important thing.
You know, I think if it's an easy decision, if it's an easy plat, if it's an easy site plan, I think planning should be able to handle it. If planning's uncomfortable handling it, I think they should be able to refer it on. I don't think that's unrealistic. And if the planning commission is not comfortable approving it themselves, and I think the planning commission would be real transparent with that. And and it could relieve another agenda item for the council.
And the application taking and delaying another month or two
Oh,
to get on that agenda.
Might encourage,
Yeah.
might encourage them to make a super site plan, maybe by default.
Yeah, I think that's basically what we mostly agreed to before.
So oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna ask, so does that mean that nothing will be approved administratively?
No,
Or do we still have the administrative?
we still have that.
Okay,
Well, for what specifically?
For the really simple ones
yeah,
that meet whatever criteria where you guys were going to approve them administratively.
Yeah, I can't remember. TJ, what were some examples of those applications?
Yeah, Katie.
Yeah, we had some of the smaller site plans were going to be that way. And then honestly, we don't have a whole lot, I'm pulling it up here. We don't have a lot of administrative. We started with a lot and then we pulled, like it was said, we kind of scaled back after hearing different conversations. And I know the town engineer had a lot of hesitations on things being administrative. And so that guided some of what we were doing and proposing. So I'll pull up exactly what's administrative. It is
Change the staff all in.
administrative adjustment, and that is it.
Yeah, and so that's basically what 10%, 15% deviation in dimensional standards. It's a way to basically have a height variation setback if things are just minor that can be adjusted administratively. Everything else, because the town currently brings, like I mentioned, just about everything to both planning commission and the town council, we felt that that's the way to start. And then I guess what I would say is the idea is once everybody starts getting comfortable with that process and the code, and we, the other part that comes out of this is that we have a whole laundry list of standards that will need to be updated or at least evaluated. And so as we start working through those and clarify some of those standards more, then maybe it becomes simpler and easier to delegate that to the planning commission. One thing I'd caution, and this is more of a personal, a professional opinion, if you will, what you're all referring to is what's generally called the call-up process. I'm not a huge fan of it simply because if you're going to entertain a call-up process, I would suggest keeping it as is for the predictability. Because what you're going to do is tell the development community, sure, you can go, this gets approved by planning commission, but then they won't know whether or not it they're gonna have another 2 months or so of a review process until the planning commission meeting. So I guess for the time being, if you are even contemplating the call-up process, I would suggest leaving the requirement to go to both to increase the transparency and clarity of that process.
That answer your question? He's talking about your idea
Yeah.
and the uncertainty it can provide for. Like if you all feel uncomfortable with the site plan and decide last minute, let's send it to town council.
It's calling that a call up to town council.
Right.
Okay.
That uncertainty doesn't rest well with some. That's what he's.
Well, I'm here to protect the town, not the developers, but I have a question, TJ. So we're talking about a site plan process within the PUD overlay, correct?
No. So right now they're two very different things.
Okay, so we have
PUD is a zoning process.
but we're talking, so do we have two site plan processes? I'm confused here. One is
No,
one with, no? There's only one site plan approval.
correct.
Okay,
And the requirements for a site plan, and Katie, if you can just make sure I'm saying this correctly, in order to be eligible or site plans would be required for any use other than single family homes or duplexes. Everything else would be required to go through a site plan process. So, any home remodels, any new home construction would not be required to go through a site plan. But this is also the process that would catch your current provision that requires all multi-building developments. So one parcel with multiple structures on it to go through a PUD process. Rather than that, they'd have to go through a site plan process.
so we not in a PUD in a PUD overlay district, if they're just developing a parcel of ground that's zoned residential or commercial, they would still go through with the site design planning process.
So the PUD sets the standards for which development can occur. It's a zone district.
Right.
And then if it's so you can have a PUD, as I showed before, where one planning area is all single family homes. Another planning area is commercial. And those uses or those single family homes would not have to go through a site plan process. They would jump to building permit. But the commercial uses in that same PUD would have to go through a site plan process and then a building permit process.
It seems like I'm not communicating effectively here.
So is your question about a parcel that doesn't have a PUD overlay on it?
Just say a general commercial parcel in Ridgway, USA, and they're gonna do construction that is allowed within that zone, that would still go through a site plan.
Well,
Correct.
Right.
Yes,
Not any variances they just wanted to do what was allowed in that district. They
Yep.
would come through a site plan process.
correct.
I like that.
And
That site plan would be prior to building permit,
correct.
instead of within the building permit.
That is correct. That is exactly what I was just going to say, that we're pulling it apart from the building permit process.
Separate
Well,
some of the
about-
things out of the building,
And it
makes the building permit
precedes-
process simpler.
The building permit.
And just to add to that, and maybe just for my own clarity, if in that scenario, the applicant was wanting to create individually saleable, buildable lots, are we still talking the site plan application, or are we talking the subdivision procedure?
Subdivision.
Right, so I just want to be sure there's some differentiation between, and it really depends on what the.
Yeah. And so hopefully this doesn't
Say they wanted to
confuse.
build a city market on that big lot behind Remax.
Okay.
So they bought whatever 3 acre lot and City Market bought it, they want to build a City Market, they're allowed to do that in that zone, they come in with a site. You're assuming they meet all.
Provided it meets all the
Yeah,
standards.
yeah,
and
right,
regs, yes.
yeah, and then if somebody else wanted to come in and sell off houses, to do that and sell off lots, they'd have to subdivide that lot. And then have the site plan. So the site plan will be required also in the subdivision process.
Not necessarily.
Depends on, again, the vision and what they're trying to achieve and under what timeline. I mean, the specific example about City Market is helpful, but I think it just jump in, TJ or Katie, but I think it just depends.
Yeah,
Yeah, I guess maybe I can use an example. And I apologize, I can't remember the name. Is it River Park? Jack, it's your property of that industrial zone that we tried to rezone not too long ago.
yeah.
Right, so that was one component, one lot within a larger subdivision where there was much of that subdivision which was platted for single family homes.
Yeah.
Some of that subdivision was platted and zoned industrial or commercial.
Yeah.
So the single family homes would not have to go through the site plan process, but the commercially zoned or industrially zoned property would have to go through the site plan process.
Hopefully we won't ever combine a plot like that again.
Actually, I think I just saw one come through a couple of weeks ago from you.
It's part of the same.
So, and I guess I would suggest that, and we can send this off again, with this in mind, maybe now it might be good to, over the next couple of weeks, revisit those scenarios that we went through a few months ago. Because maybe this put it into some different context for you all. And I think that going through those processes, those scenarios might be helpful too. Because Katie walked through those quite clearly. But again, I don't think we had this context previously.
I think that would be helpful.
We're ready to approve.
You approve my presentation?
Yeah.
But we like Katie's better.
Yeah. Touche. Touche.
I guess we'll have to send it on to council.
We have to call up council.
All right, well, if you have nothing more for me on this, Preston, maybe what we can do is Katie and I'll put together another email to send you that kind of puts this and the scenario stuff together later this week, so you all have it in one spot to revisit it.
It's a great idea. Yes.
Excellent, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't think we're done. Don't be packing up, people. It's
You're
not,
done with me for a few minutes.
that was just one section.
Yeah.
Okay, everybody go home.
Katie's up with number 3. You want me to read it?
Sure.
Discussion regarding industrial use classifications. Katie.
Oh, I have something. The tables, I like the size of them, but the flow charts, I would like to see a little bigger.
Okay,
It looks like they could easily be wider, which would obviously take up more vertical, but I think they could be bigger. I thought the tables were fine, but the flow charts had too small of some font on them.
sounds good. Okay, do you need to read the agenda item or are you good if I hop in here?
Hop in, Katie.
Okay, all right, so I didn't do a presentation for you tonight. I thought I'd give you a break from me talking for so long. But what I did want to do tonight is just focus on the industrial uses and how we arranged them, because I know there were some questions at our last work session about it. And it kind of got me thinking and trying to organize them a little bit better to be clear about what we were doing. So you had a memo in your packet for tonight, and then this table was included in there. And so what we did was we took the existing code terms are on that far left column. the proposed industrial type of what we're trying to make it, whether it's mostly light, medium, or heavy industrial. And then we compared the existing district with the proposed district uses. So I just wanted to check and see if anyone had any comments on this, thoughts, if it made sense, or if we need to take a little direction and go a different route with how we handle the industrial uses.
Well, it seems to me that we're only doing part of the industrial uses. I mean, there's a whole lot of industrial uses. We're talking about just metal manufacturing here as a general term in the different way that the metal finishing and welding shops and manufacturing processing of metal is addressed here in this deal. But there's a lot of other uses within the industrial part that I think with industrial code that I think we should also look at. Seems like we're only part of it.
So if they're not in this table, I don't think they're in the code right now, or I missed them. So do you have any good examples that I can double check and kind of give me some guidance of where you'd like to see those as far as light, medium, or heavy?
No, I haven't done that. I mean, I can for
Okay.
this, but I don't have it today.
Okay, and that's okay if you want to think about it a little bit and maybe send me an email so I could do a little bit more research. I thought that I pulled out anything that was connected to it, but I definitely could have missed something in here.
Well, it's possible that you pulled out everything that was in the code and Jack's talking about some actual uses, maybe?
Yeah, that's gonna
I
make
haven't
it-
really looked at those uses in some time. I mean, I need to go back. I'm not prepared. But it seems like there's a bunch of different uses in the I-1 and the I-2 that are confusing, and that's about all I remember about them. So I'll do some homework.
Okay, if you don't mind, I would appreciate it. And then I can kind of take a look at those and see if we need to, if they're not in the code right now, see if we should be adding them into one of those light as an example for light, medium, or heavy, if that works. So,
But in general, you're just trying to simplify this.
correct. And just, yes, exactly. And kind of get rid of some of the confusion that existed with the uses that we kind of put in similar colors to show how they connected, but we're different currently.
Yeah, I like the colors. And then, so for medium, would there be a place then to go to see what's included in medium?
Yep, so the definition of medium is, it basically has, the definition here, I won't read it verbatim to you. And we did include, for some of them, we did include, but is not limited to. And for example, machine and welding, just more common things people were looking at to be clear that that's where they were falling under.
So I'm pretty confused here. So we're just talking about classifying the different types of manufacturing in there, or?
For the, yeah, so not office, not retail, not that type of uses. What we took was the industrial uses that are currently in the code, that are specifically stated, and then trying to group them instead of having your land use table have all of these items on there, including contradictions, because there's 3 existing uses right now in the code that deal with metal, trying to group them into light, medium, or heavy. So then when you look at the land use table, you, first of all, you check the definition and you see if the industrial use falls under light, medium, or heavy. And then you go to the table of uses. And then you can see how it's allowed, whether it's allowed by right, conditional use, or not allowed at all in those districts.
So we're gonna have three light, medium, and heavy uses, but we only have 2 zones. So we would allow the different manufacturing, light, manufacturing, medium in one of the 2 zones. Is that where we're going with this?
So right now, typically in Ridgway overall, it's safe to say that the industrial uses are throughout GC, mostly by conditional use, I-1 and I-2. So what we're looking to do is continue to have industrial uses permitted by conditional use in GC, and then some by conditional use or by right in the I-1, which is now turning to LI. And then the more heavier industrial uses would be in the proposed GI, either by right or still by conditional use.
And that would
And
be
then this isn't obviously showing you the whole land use table. This was just trying to shrink down for a discussion on industrial uses, so you could see what's now and what we're proposing. So it was understood, and then if it's not agreed upon, then we don't need to go this route with light, medium, and heavy. It just seemed like to us it made more sense, but we want to see what you think.
So are we proposing to rezone the existing I-1 and I-2 to L1 and whatever?
I think not rezone, just changing the names of them, because it was, the old names weren't really saying
Yeah.
much, so.
It's all, it's pretty confusing.
Yep, so a meeting or two ago, we got the go ahead to go with light industrial and then general industrial for those. So nothing's changing, the names are changing and the zone map will change with new names, but it is not affecting the boundaries of the, on the zone map or any of that, what we're doing. So yeah, is there any other
I
thoughts?
think we're going in the right direction on this. I mean, does anyone else have anything? It's confusing, but it was confusing before. We're trying to make it less confusing.
Yeah, I've got a question here. So I'm not sure which of the welding shops this would be, but we have one that we receive a fair amount of, we have some complaints from some neighbors regarding a welding shop that's located in a residential area. Is this classification intended to cover that as well? Or
No,
this is
No, that's
strictly
a home
for general
occupation.
commercial and industrial?
correct. That's a home occupation.
Okay, and that's okay. 'Cause we're still saying that, right?
Correct.
Okay, all right.
Yeah. Home occupations, if they meet the standards, and we didn't change any of those standards. It was kind of out of the scope, so
Okay, fair enough. That was it.
I'll still double check to make sure, but yeah.
Yeah, I think this looks good. I think the only question I might have is the table that you gave us in the packet says existing code term, and then some words are in green, some words are in black, some words are in orange. I think it'd be helpful to see where you're. I mean, I think we need to make some edits to the existing terminology, and I think that's what you're suggesting. I'm just not clear on when and where that's happening.
Yeah, so you won't actually see this left column, these terms in the new code anymore. These are be gone.
So gotcha. Then we'll just have the definitions instead.
And
Yep,
then all
we
the
got
light colors, the three light colors won't be there. The dark color columns will be there. See, it's existing and proposed.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. That makes sense. And then, so we're falling back on, and I think this kind of addresses Jack's concern, is that instead of having naming, and it's impossible, right, to name every potential industrial use, instead, let's have just general definitions that should cover everything. There still may be some gray areas, but we'll deal with those on a case by case basis, right?
Yeah. I just remembered TJ told me he didn't like all my colors and I forgot to change it. But yeah, your left column is going to go away. And now
I
you'll
got you.
have
Okay.
what's in the middle column, and then you'll have those definitions. Yep.
If I may, just real quick, that you might remember going back to the table of uses, we created the table of uses. Right now, the town doesn't have a table of uses. Each zone district has a list of uses that are allowed by right or through conditional
Use, or, yeah.
And so what you're seeing here is all of the uses that are listed and spelled out in the various districts. What our goal in the table of uses is to allow more flexibility. So we've added a new column to the left called use categories. And so that allows for more interpretation of broader categories of uses. And then within each of those use categories, there are uses. And then each of those uses, as Katie will show, will have your use allowed approval level, if you will, in each zone district. And so what essentially we're doing, what that exercise, this table that Katie put together, which as much as I get disoriented with a whole bunch of colors, I think it's a good exercise to show how it all kind of relates. That we're saying that you don't need all of those specific industrial type uses. Rather than identify every use that could be there, we're managing for impacts. And so the difference between light, medium, and heavy industrial uses is going to be the impact on the neighboring properties, essentially.
Mhm.
So your light industrial will be things that are, your neighbor can't hear you, doesn't know that it's more of an office type of an environment or research type stuff. When you move up to medium, well, maybe you have more traffic and maybe you have a little bit more outdoor presence. And then when you move to heavy, that's when you get into the dust, the odor, some of those other things. And I'm kind of just speaking off the top of my head on this. I don't know if that's going to be in line with the definitions, but that's the concept, that we're moving away from these specific things and looking at the impacts that a use will have on its neighboring property or the neighborhood. And we're going to regulate for those. So that's how the
Well, I
whole.
think that
thing's
makes
kinda
good
set up.
sense.
That sounds good. Yeah.
That's a big mistake.
It's in the other package. I think that makes sense, because we're never gonna come up with every single use, and what it really, we don't care what the uses are on, really. We want to know what matters is what the impact is, and that's how things will be classified. So like, for example, coffee roasting. I mean, that's probably up in medium or even heavy, because there's a smell associated with it.
Correct.
The thing is, you have to have flammable material. I read the definition.
Yeah,
So
that's right.
every has to have toxic.
Toxic or-
flammable material. Light, when you take a raw material and you process it right there, and it's not flammable, it's not toxic. So light is, and then medium is where you take a raw material and you combine it with another raw material to manufacture something different. And heavy is where you're dealing with combining toxic raw materials that are highly flammable, is the word. Or highly toxic, is the word.
So is that,
So coffee roasting would be one. You're taking a raw material bean. And you're putting it in, you're roasting it, putting it in a bag. You're not manipulating that bean. Now, you're gonna still have odor issues
Impact.
in light. Yeah. You
I
still have-
believe that in light, and I'll double check the definition, the intent is, like TJ said, you're not supposed to have any odor or noise or anything going over the property line. Oh yeah, so all light manufacturing activities are contained entirely within building, and noise, odor, smoke, heat, glare, and vibration resulting from the manufacturing activity are confined entirely within the building.
so then coffee's not in light? Yeah.
Correct. Coffee gets bumped up, and it's because of that, the smell that you get from a lot of coffee roasters around places.
And I don't have a problem with coffee roasting. I was just using that as an
Yeah,
example.
no, it's a good example. A lot of people don't think of that smell if they haven't been in a town that has it, so.
So do a lot of other towns use this in this way?
Yeah, that tends to be the typical, I would say, and most common way to do it.
I like it.
So I think we're pretty good. Anyone else got
Yeah,
input on
looks
this?
good.
Yeah, no.
There might be some members of the public on Zoom or welcome to chime in.
Speak now. Public.
I think one of the-
Public comment now.
Hi, it's Chris Hawkins with Alpine Planning. Sorry, you caught me off guard there. So thanks for giving me a chance to talk. I sent a letter to you all on behalf of Four Winds, Preserve PUD and Iron Rail. And so hopefully you had a chance to dig through it. In general, these code amendments are very overwhelming and there's a lot to them. So really appreciate the efforts, and in the end, I think everyone is very supportive of a new modern land use code in Ridgway. So, I'm not sure if tonight's the night to make overall comments, but maybe I'll wait on that. But, the number one issue for my clients is just making sure that these new processes aren't going to apply to the pending applications that are in process. And that really is, the Four Winds, whatever happens with that, assuming it moves on to preliminary and final plat. And then Iron Rail, which has sketch plan approval and is working on preliminary plat materials. Those two in particular, knowing that all this is going forward, it would be really great to have a very clear and concrete grandfathering of any application of these new standards or processes to those applications. So getting something to that effect, better written or clearer in either the code or the adopting ordinance would be appreciated. The other, kind of concern that was in that letter was kind of blending the master plan with the code. Because there's a section in the code 741 where the regulations are blended in with the master plan, and basically they're saying they constitute part of the town's master plan. And it really confuses things because the master plan is an advisory document and the code and the zoning map are regulatory, and that distinction should be kept clear. I'm not sure the intent on blending those two together, but I just think that causes more confusion. Instead, it'd be better just to adopt what you want of the master plan in the code and simply have the master plan standalone and the code standalone. On the vested property rights, when you're thinking about that, if you could just make that a part of the process, that would make it more efficient. Overall, right now it's written as a separate process at the beginning of the code, and a lot of jurisdictions blend those together. Just something to think about overall. And then there's also in that section, there's maybe it just needs to be pulled out, the applicability to pending application section that might not want to be in there. As far as, the other details of the code that are out there, I hope there's, everyone has a chance to read through it. I'm not going to get into the details of this, but process wise, and along the lines of what you were talking tonight, the site plan review process in most jurisdictions is basically a process that's reviewed by a planning commission or a DRB or historic commission, something like that. It's in no jurisdiction I work in the mountain communities or have worked for is it reviewed and approved by council. Even if you look at your review matrix of what goes up, even limited use permits and conditional use permits are approved by the planning commission, and only site plan reviews go to council. And if it is truly a specific and objective criteria, which it should be for site plan reviews, then process wise, I think that makes sense for the planning commission to be the review authority for that, with some sort of appeal process to council. I think TJ called it a call up, but I think in general, it's an appeals process and who has the right to appeal. That's more typical. Some jurisdictions do have call ups, but that's the way it works because council should be the ultimate review authority for all land use applications, not just site plans and those sorts of things. And in this, I'd keep in mind how much work is the council taking on and how much is the planning commission taking on, and how can you balance that out a little bit? The other major comment on site plan process is that criteria should, again, this is my opinion, you're doing this for uses by right, where the property owners today just submit a building permit. Now you're creating a new process, which I support, but to all of a sudden make it a beauty contest with a compatibility criterion versus specific objective criteria, such as how do you make a project compatible? That's a little dangerous. You're all of a sudden changing that to more of a rezoning to have a site plan being compatible, in my opinion. And I'd really look at that criteria to make it as specific as you can. And there's other examples in that site plan section. There's one on
Michelle, can I interrupt for a second?
Yeah.
Chris, while I appreciate your comments 100%, you're getting really way off into the weeds here when what we're just discussing tonight is the stuff that's on the agenda. And there'll be plenty of opportunity for you to get into the bigger issues. We've received your letter. The staff hasn't had a chance to review that yet, I don't believe. So I just don't want you to think that we're going to be able to address all these comments you're making tonight when we're really trying to focus on the stuff in front of us tonight.
Which is process stuff, which is what I'm talking about now. So, okay, John, if you don't want to hear from me, that's fine. So, okay.
I didn't say I didn't want to hear from you. I said I wanted you to keep your comments to the specific things we're discussing tonight, which were the somewhat the process, but really most importantly right now is that the industrial designation.
Yeah,
So,
nobody asked for
um,
comments earlier. That's why I didn't comment then, John. So it's fine. I don't want to disrupt the flow of your meeting, but I have major comments on the process stuff. So maybe it's better at a future meeting after staff's had a chance to review it, that we can see what if any adjustments are made, and then I'll come back. But the way I saw it, is this scheduled to be adopted next month by the Planning Commission or a recommendation?
We'll have to check the schedule. I don't have it in front of me. The next milestone that comes to mind is April 12th town council meeting, where the collective town council will have their eyes on it for the first time. You know, I guess that's not fair to say. Some have participated in the previous work sessions. Keep in mind, we're in month 8 of this process, essentially. So again, April 12th town council meeting work session to review the chapter 7 updates. April 25th, I think, is the next planning commission meeting. TJ, I don't recall off the top of my head what's slated for that based on the timeline.
Okay. Well, I guess since we're not talking about process stuff, I have no more comments, since I don't, the light industrial matrix, I have no comments on. So, all right. Thank you.
If
Thanks.
I may,
And we appreciate your letter, and staff will take a look at it and deal with the comments. And there's some really good things in there, but I think John's point is, I agree with John's point is we're trying to specifically work on this section.
Understood. I'm sure you're going to get more comments on this too. So thank you.
Yeah, and if I can offer just real quick, I don't know if TJ was going to say this, but yeah, Chris, do appreciate your comments. Mayor Clark was right. I haven't had a chance to delve into your letter. Again, appreciate you taking the time to put that together and kind of highlight some, if not most, of what you put in that letter. But staff can certainly be in touch. As you said, several applications we're working through, so we'll definitely be in touch on a number of things, but on those points specifically, and as we go through the remainder of the process. So just want to acknowledge that.
Okay. Thank you. Enjoy. Have a good night.
Thanks, Chris.
Any other public comments on what we're discussing? TJ and Katie, do you need any other information from us?
That was it from me right now. Preston did send you the overview of all the documents right now, so you can take a look, so you have enough time to look at them as we're moving forward. And then, like Preston said, we're going to come up with some of the main focuses for the Board of Trustees, or sorry, the Town Council, to make sure that they understand exactly what we're proposing, kind of how we went through a lot with you over the last few meetings on process and scenarios. And then we did, just as a side note, we are actually we're going to put together kind of responses to the public comments as they come in, so that it's in writing of kind of where things are in the code that may not have been found, or we'll double check things, or some of them are outside of the scope of work, but we are gonna take some time to make sure we address each comment thoroughly that comes in.
So then how will that work? Will we see you addressing those comments?
If there was things that were in the code that aren't clear, maybe we'll try to clarify them. But if there are things about changing the process that we've already talked about, they would need to come back and be discussed more, or we probably will say this has been discussed thoroughly at the work sessions and this isn't where the town wanted to go right now. But that way, at least if we address each one, then you understand completely what was brought up and kind of know where the public is coming from on their thoughts.
I really appreciate that, because when I read the letter, I asked Preston at the beginning of the meeting, I'm like, how, like at a public hearing, we'd say, thank you for your comments, we're not going to respond. This is different. So I was like, I don't know how that works,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there's enough questions and comments that warrants a response that we'll put together and probably work with Preston on it.
Well, and something I didn't want to go back to Chris with was, well, okay, yeah, you want these projects should be grandfathered in, which I wasn't clear if that was the agreement, but then what if the new process actually serves them better? How will they straddle that line? Do you know what I wasn't clear on what we promised current applicants, or if we did.
We certainly haven't made I don't know, that was funny to me. We certainly haven't made promises, but I believe the intent, TJ, correct me if I'm wrong. The vote to verify was for existing applicants to be able to undertake the process as it currently stands. You know, applicants that are already in the queue.
That was my understanding.
Yeah, mine.
That's been the understanding I've had the entire time. I'm just not 100% comfortable. So that's why I'm saying, TJ, correct me if I'm wrong, but it wouldn't make sense to me, again, off the cuff, to hold them to new processes and regulations that they didn't sign up for when they initially submitted an application, and then all this was thrown. And that's my 2 cents there. But I saw TJ nodding. I think he seems like you're
Falling asleep.
The one thing, no, I think you're generally correct. And first, I want to be clear that we have not made any promises or even any
I should have said, what was the understanding? I know you guys didn't make any promises. That was too strong a word.
but I think the thing that we've seen elsewhere when new codes are adopted, and this is what Chris was alluding to too, either drafted in the code, which isn't necessarily the best thing to do, or do it in the adoption ordinance, that where for a period of time, applicants coming in or applicants, projects that are already in the queue and just moving along in the process, have the opportunity to choose which code they'd like to use. That's not necessarily the best either, but there's a lot of ways to do that. And I guess just we can cross, and as Preston mentioned, we certainly need to talk to Bo about that strategy. But I think that's going to be kind of the discussion at the adoption. I think for right now, we just want to talk about where are we going as a community, and then we can figure out the best way to get between here and there. But yes, there's certainly going to be a conversation on who is in the queue. What's that mean? If they're in a subdivision process, do they get to move forward to a rezoning process too? You know, all that kind of stuff. There's more to it than just saying, yeah, everyone's kind of grandfathered under the old code.
Thanks for the clarification on that. Do we have anything else for TJ and Katie? Or do they get to go on with their lives for the moment?
I actually have another question here. So this is partially Preston and partially TJ and Katie, but under the Planning Commission section of Dropbox, we have a chapter 7, which also has chapter 6 and 8 updates in it. I'm seeing duplicates on those, and I'm trying to understand, is there a difference? I mean, there significant size difference in the files, but if we're reviewing those, is there a particular one we're supposed to be reviewing?
Russ, there's a good question. One is a Word document, one's a PDF. Sorry for the confusion there. So you can open the one that you would like best. And I think looks like I must have just copied and pasted everything when I saved the Word documents as PDFs. So,
okay, gotcha. All right, that makes sense. I hadn't really noticed that, but all right, fair enough. And then if we still have comments on any of that, is the best thing to do just drop a note to TJ and Katie and copy you, Preston?
I think that's a good path. Katie, would you prefer something different?
No, I think that would be great and appreciated. I don't think we got you Word documents to the most updated one. So let's make sure that we only have the finalized. There should just, maybe it's worth deleting or creating a new folder so they know exactly what to review. Currently.
What you sent me last week was a bunch of Word docs that I ended up saving as PDFs. I think I intended to put the PDFs in the Dropbox, but I think I put everything in there. So I think that's the explanation.
Okay, sorry about that.
All good, all good.
Anything else for TJ and Katie?
Thanks, you guys. Appreciate
Thanks.
all your work.
Yeah.
Have a good night and a good week.
Thanks, everyone. We'll see you next week.
Okay.
All right.
Any code discussion other than the one we're actually addressing? Thank you. I don't think we need, I don't know, do we close the work session?
Or we have to print minutes.
Right,
No, you don't.
we don't.
We don't have to do anything but approve the minutes.
So I need approval of I need a motion for approval of the minutes.
I make a motion, we approve the minutes as submitted.
I second that.
Can we get a roll call on that?
Sure. Commissioner, oh wait, no.
Yes, I
Abstaining. Commissioner Nelson,
I,
Petroselli,
Yes, ma'am.
Mayor Pro Tem Meyer,
Aye.
Mayor Clark,
Aye.
and Chairperson Montague.
Aye.
All right, so now.
What else do we have? As in, unofficial things, any updates from town council?
I'd like to talk about
All right, Jack, what would you like to talk about?
anything going on with Jack Young's project over there with any wood in the air. I mean, you drive by, it's just sitting there fully landscaped. He's got us plat done. Will there ever be houses there or anybody know anything?
Well, it's a question for them, but we haven't seen the plat for execution. They've requested, I say they, what is the name of their development? It's
Ridgway Homes.
Vista Park Commons.
Vista Park Development LLC has requested an agenda item at the next town council meeting to discuss I believe it's water tap fees. Just full disclosure there, but again, haven't seen, they've received their final plat approval. The SIA is in place and executed. Haven't seen that plat come through with developer signatures, development team signatures for town.
So they don't need a final plat done yet?
No.
So they sort of
No,
go.
so I haven't heard from the development team on what the timeline is.
wait,
I'm sorry, they're going to the next city council meeting to discuss water taps?
Yes,
I'd like to go.
I don't. Those meetings are open to the public. I don't know the full scope of what the request will be. I just.
Oh, it'll be interesting.
So, but I can give some updates as to what happened at the last town council meeting. As you guys probably know, the temporary moratorium on the acceptance of development applications was extended to July 31st to accommodate this, the updated timeline, updated schedule.
Did anyone have issue with it?
I don't, no, not from.
No.
The other thing I think worth reporting on is the town council approved a deviation from code requirements to allow Riverfront Village to account for their required electricity improvements. To allow that to be accounted for in an SIA and not have that done before final plat. Reason for that being the electric transformers that they ordered many moons ago, I think last summer even, aren't slated to be delivered, available and delivered until, I don't know, John Russ, did they say like August sometime?
I was thinking it was maybe even November or something like that.
Oh, I've
Sometime
heard
in the
that that's a
fall,
problem. I've
which
heard
is a big issue and obviously a big impediment to what they're trying to do over there. So the deviation was approved by the town council on that front. The code is very clear about what infrastructure improvements are required before a final plat can be approved and what can be accounted for in an SIA. Just to provide some background. So that was a deviation, was approved. So.
I had some questions. And I don't know the name of the development, but the common house or whatever they're trying to do off of Sherman, like right across.
Co-housing.
co-housing.
Yeah, the co-housing. I thought I saw something that said that they're going forward with that. Is that true?
You know, and that's interesting that you bring that up. I've had some phone calls to that effect. I have not heard from the development team in quite some time. We haven't received any updated submittals to better understand if they have met their conditions of preliminary plat approval. We haven't seen updated plans as they're supposed to provide for. But did hear from a general contractor that claims that they've been contracted with by the development team, the Alpenglow co-housing team, to spearhead the infrastructure improvements and beyond. And it explains that, you know, I haven't heard from the development team. So we have a lot to kind of work out there and sort it through. But in short, to answer your question, you know, there's some boxes that need to be checked and some meetings that need to be taking place, specifically pre-construction meetings. And even before that takes place, we need some updated plans and documents. So sorry for the long-winded answer, but.
No, that's good because I was concerned about the configuration and what happened to the road, all that stuff.
So the construction plans have not been approved yet?
They've, the last time they were submitted and reviewed by our team, specifically the engineers, was in 2019 or 2020. So.
And don't they only get a couple years or a certain time frame?
Great question. They've been requesting extensions, their preliminary plat approval, and I think currently the term or the deadline is October, the expiration, that's the word, is October of this year, October 2023.
Okay.
So is there still a plan to align that railroad?
No, haven't had conversations with the development team on that specifically. We've been working with, I mean, that's a big undertaking and a big project as it's, you know, interfaces with CDOT right away and, you know, state highway. So town council's talked about it several times over the last few years. It's going to be tough, but in order to align, we're talking about aligning railroad.
On this side?
No, across.
On the other side, that hefty initiative, but haven't had, you know, there hasn't been much movement on the side of the development team, so we haven't been able to further those conversations.
And then my next question was, I didn't want to bring it up earlier because we were talking about the industrial coding, but I saw that it said that you could build within 250 feet of water flumes. And I just remember having conversations when Jen Coates was here, and I thought that number was higher. I thought it was like 500. So I didn't.
That was for residential.
And that's what I thought for living
Not
residents.
for the industrial, not for the manufacturers.
But then I kind of did some research just on Colorado coding, and we still kind of say 500 feet is good. 250 feet was used for a location next to like water or ponds, other water or ponds. So I just didn't know where the 250 came from. Is that what the way our standard reads today?
Yeah, that 250 and 500 foot setback mark is what I've seen. It's not in our municipal code, and I don't have it in front of me. I don't know if it's in state statute or something. We can try to dig that up. It's embedded somewhere else. That's what we've been going off of. Bill, do you recall?
No, though maybe John does.
Or yeah, John.
I just
I'm
remember
sorry,
500 for
The
residential.
distance necessary from the wastewater treatment plant for residential versus commercial.
The way I remember this,
Industrial.
the state is 300 feet joint as opposed to 500 foot. And the 500 foot is a Ridgway. I'm not sure if that's correct, but that's what I remember.
I don't know that there's any, I don't know that that's correct, but we can verify.
That's yeah.
500 is the number I've always quoted.
It's been 500 forever.
Yeah.
But also there's a plat note in the industrial saying no residential. Well,
Yeah, because there's, and John, you might remember who built there within the 500, and that they had to use it only for light industrial use rather than being able to live in that unit.
oh hell, there's 5 or 6 people.
Well, yeah, but
Well, no.
it actually, it came to enforcement years ago with one of those individuals.
And they're still there.
Probably.
Anything else?
Pizza.
John, you got anything for us?
Nope, I'm ready to go have dinner.
Well, all right, then.
All
It's
right.
still light. This meeting's
Well,
ending.
Joey, where we meeting?
Santa Fe, and it's still light out.
It's amazing
Woohoo.
this time. of year.
Thanks everybody for showing up, and I'll see you again next week. Is there anyone that's not gonna be able to make it?
I need to be in 3 different places at that time, but I'm gonna try to make it here, but if I can't make it here, I'm going to definitely be on Zoom.
Pam will not be attending.
This bank, oh,
I'm sorry, yes, this Pam Oyster. She's at
she's not gonna attend it as a citizen or as a board member, either.
and I believe that'll be essentially a recusal from that. I don't want to speak for her, but that's what I've gathered.
Yeah, we talked about that last time.
Did we clarify if she could attend it as the public?
I thought we did.
Again, I'm not legal counsel, but I believe that's anyone's prerogative to attend the meeting, an open meeting.
Okay,
So I believe she could, but maybe not a best practice, but she's not planning to attend regardless. So
okay.
good question.
I don't have anything else. Anyone else? Look at TJ stayed with us. He must not have anything else going on.
Make a motion to adjourn.
See how
So moved.
look how long this year is.
I don't have my hand.
This is the joy of Tuesday nights for me.
Thanks, everyone.
We'll see you all next week. Have a good night.
Good night, all.
Good night.
Oh,
Bon appetit, John.
are we getting